Have you ever heard the term about coiling up like a corkscrew to resist with your lower body as you turn your upper body, generating more power? Today, I'm going to dispel that myth and talk you through what you should be doing and how you should create that separation from upper body and lower body, not in the backswing, but in the start of the downswing. Make sure you check out this video. So as mentioned there in the intro, we're going to be talking about generating more power. And the term is X factor or X factor stretch, which is the difference between upper body and lower body. Now, there is a misconception and there is instructional books highlighting this. I realize there's a lot of info in there, but it does a lot of harm. Golfers, I find, are trying to resist with their lower body to try and create the biggest upper body movement they can while restricting their lower body. Well, if I really did restrict my lower half, you can see I'm hardly going to be able to rotate my upper body. If I don't let my hips turn at all, I could only turn my torso, my chest 15-20 degrees. Now, of course, if you try and resist fully here, there's going to be a little bit of movement. I'm not suggesting there's going to be zero, but if you're really trying to resist and hold flex in that trail leg, you're restricting hip turn. So it tends to mean the person can only make what looks like a half a golf swing unless they then lift their arms to the top of the golf swing. So they're completing the movement, not by creating more coil, but actually with this lifting movement. Or perhaps we see such a resistance here that the player hangs over onto their lead side too much in the backswing. So that corkscrew analogy you often hear about turning the upper body against a resisted lower body, for me, does more harm than good. Where I want you to create that separation is actually in the transition, the start of the downswing. And you can see this when you look at power hitters, right? Look at the long drive guys and girls out there, the people generating a lot of speed. They're allowing this hip to turn on the backswing, their trail hip. And as the trail hip turns, you will see I will lose some flex. Now, there are some golfers with some flex, some with the leg dead straight at the top. There's not one method for all, but you will see that the leg is straightening and the hip is turning. You will not see any golfers who don't create any rotation here with their trail hip. Good golfers get their right bum cheek, for a right-handed golfer, their trail hip further behind them than it was at the setup position. They're not going this way forwards. They are rotating and creating some load of pressure into their trail side in the backswing. So we need that leg to straighten somewhat. We need that hip to turn. We need to load that pressure into our trail side. And that allows me to make the biggest shoulder turn, upper body turn as possible away from the target. So we actually create some power by obviously getting our arms further away from the golf ball, creating bigger levers here, almost stretching there. And again, we can't do that by restricting this half. I need this to turn in the backswing. So it is not that corkscrew resisted lower half turn the upper half. We're allowing the lower half to move to create a bigger torso rotation in the backswing, get my arms further away from the golf ball. Where we can talk about that separation, that X factor stretch, is in the transition. So what we see with the majority of elite golfers is as they're completing their arm swing in the backswing, their lower body is already starting to go back towards the target and starting to rotate. So their arms are still moving backwards and the lower body is actually starting to move forwards. So we're creating this X factor stretch, not in the backswing, but in the transitional movement from the top of the backswing to start of the downswing. So where we would normally say, well, let's get 90 degrees of shoulder turn and maybe half of that hip turn, right? 45. These golfers, if they do get those kind of numbers, they're almost keeping their upper body back at 90 as their lower body is actually moving back towards 30. That's creating that separation. So it's starting the downswing with the lower body first. The same way you would if I was throwing this like a javelin, my first movement is going to be this, but I'm going to restrict or resist with my right shoulder, my right elbow staying back as long as possible, even though that my lower half is starting to rotate back towards the target, okay? So we're not restricting that movement by not attaining the turns, put my teeth back in, not allowing those hips to turn. We're letting everything turn to load here and then we're unloading with the lower body and resisting with the upper body, keeping the upper body back. So what I'd encourage you to do, how can I work on that? How can I create some exercises? What we're going to use first of all is just a couple of alignment sticks. Now I've just got here, one of my lessons made me this, a little Velcro strap that works brilliantly, but you could just push the cane through your belt loops. So I've now got this orange cane across my hips, or representing my hip line here, okay? And I'm just going to hold the other cane or club on my shoulders. And what I want you to try and do, first of all, is get used to moving one without the other, what we call disassociation. So can we turn our shoulders, but restrict with our hips? So we're keeping this stick across my hips pretty static, turning my shoulders. Again, you could only see there, I'm allowing my shoulders probably to turn 15, 20 degrees, open and closed, open and closed. The harder one is, can we turn our hips, okay, and restrict with my upper body? So my shoulders are staying still. Now as my hips turn, you will see my trail leg starts to straighten as the hip turns behind me, and the opposite on the way through, my lead leg would start to straighten as my hips turn. So I'm actually creating, again, disassociation, some funky dance moves, getting my hips turning without my shoulders. There we go. That's restricting with my upper body, okay? Now what we're trying to do is make a golf swing here, making the biggest torso movement we can, allowing our hips to turn to achieve that. And what I'm trying to do in the transition is feel like I keep my upper body back, but start down with my lower half. Now my lower half should be pushing down into my left, my lead shoe, so there should be some pressure moving down there, and as that moves down, my hips are starting to open back up. So they've gone from this sort of angle where they're pointing to the right, and they're rotating back towards the targets. They're actually returning back to nearer my start position, okay, back to where they are parallel to the target line. So I'm trying to make that movement here at the start of the downswing, almost keeping my arms up and starting with my lower body first. So that's a good feel for me. I'm going to show you another exercise in a minute, just using a medicine ball. But first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make some little swings, and I'm just trying to get the feeling that as my arms finish the backswing, my lower body is starting to turn back towards the target, creating that separation, okay? So I'm not going to hit it hard, but okay, don't worry about the strike of these first few. I'm almost over-exaggerating here. That felt a bit funky, but almost trying to get my hips working back towards the target while my arms are still working backwards, just to give me that sensation. Okay, so I'm overdoing it, overfeeling it. That was a better strike, but really got that sensation that my lower body's starting to turn towards the target. The only other little thing we need with our upper body is we don't want to be gripping it really tight. We actually need quite soft wrists, because we can create some real power move with this stored up wrist movement that I create here. So we don't want a lot of tightness and tension. We almost need to leave our arms up, soft arms, soft wrists, and we're starting with our lower body. Okay, so as my upper body is completing, my lower body is starting in that transition movement here, okay? Upper body's still going back, lower body's starting a little bit more on the downswing. What we see with the majority of elite golfers is they reach their maximum pressure into their trail foot at about 3/4 of the way back, when their lead arm is parallel to the ground. As they complete their backswing, as I said, the pressure is already starting to move back towards the target, so nearer 50-50. Let me see if I can just hit one, not overthinking it, but trying to get that transition to create some more speed. So it felt pretty powerful to me. That's a 6-iron flying out there at about 170 odd yards. Got the sensation that my lower body was out racing in the early parts of my downswing, my upper half. Could I create more of that? Absolutely. I'm not the most powerful golfer out there. You may be better at this than me, but the more we train for it, the better. So the next exercise I've got for you is something you could do in the gym. You could obviously do it at home and grab a medicine ball or a weighted ball. At worst, you could always do it with a football or a basketball, something on those lines that you might have to hand. Now, you may have seen me do this before if you're not new to my channel, but I'm actually going to swing this ball back. This is 5 kilograms, so it's got some weight to it. And what I'm going to start to do is actually unwind my lower body, but feel like I keep my upper body back. So I'm going to be throwing the ball behind me. If I start with my upper body and lower body at the same time, I'll be throwing the ball out in front of me or towards the target. So I'm trying to get the sensation of throwing the ball behind me as my hips actually move back towards the target. Let me demonstrate. So my lower body is moving that way. My arms were moving down. You can see quite clearly there, that is keeping my back to the target a little longer. That's almost keeping my upper body pointing away from the target, even though my lower body's going forwards. So it's a good feel that you want to create here. Load into the backswing, but then create that separation in the transition where my lower body is starting to move forwards towards the target. So some football throws, medicine balls, whatever you can get your hands on would work really well if this is something you need to work on. Remember, just the theory is don't restrict this side in the backswing. Let that hip load, let that hip turn, create some power, some resistance into this trail foot, but not by restricting. Allow it to move. Where we create the separation is making sure that we start our downswing with our lower body first. Now, I've filmed a number of videos and I'll put some ideas just here that are worth checking out. You could focus on starting with the lower body, and I've done a video on how to start the downswing with your lower half that I'll put a link just here. But I get some better results with golfers where instead of asking them to start with the lower half, I ask them to restrict their upper half, so feel like their upper body stays back a little longer in that first movement. Each to their own, but when we're doing some practice swings, we're just going to try and get that feeling of almost my lower body starting to turn back to the target, my upper body staying back or my arms staying up. Well, I'll take the strike on all of them that I've hit there, turn that one over a touch to the left, but that was the longest. And I was just thinking to myself, having done some of those exercises with the med ball there, doing those throws, I actually just felt a little bit loose. I felt like I could create that resistance. I know I've missed it a little left, but it was more like 180 and it was a ball speed up to 124. So that was my quickest ball speed. That was my longest shot. It felt like I created that separation as much as I can get the sensation of it. It's always worth looking on video. The key from this video, don't restrict the lower half in the backswing, let it go. Where you create the separation is making sure that your downswing starts with your lower body. And those couple of exercises I demonstrated there using the alignment sticks and then doing some throw balls, some throwing exercises with the ball, almost creating the separation, is really going to help you feel that downswing movement. If the video has helped, hit the thumbs up, share it with as many golfers as you can. Right now, YouTube are suggesting the next video from me that would be relevant for you, and it's just here, so check it out as well.